Morning everyone, welcome to Wednesday. Through the course of winter into spring in the UK, we have at least three sort of clear seasons of flowers. The crocuses, and the snowdrops, and then the daffodils, and then the dandelions. And we love the crocuses. They're beautiful, they're hopeful, they tell us that winters are coming to an end. We love the snowdrops, they do much the same thing, but heading towards Easter. And then the daffodils emerge, and if you live in a place like York with the quite frankly millions of daffodils that just appear around the city on the earthen banks around the ancient walls, they are a sight to behold. I know someone getting married next year on Easter Saturday, and her great hope is that the daffodils will be out and won't be past their best. I'm pretty sure they will be. We love them. They're beautiful. You can pick them and buy them, or, well, snowdrops not so much. Not supposed to do that. Crocuses either. And then the dandelions come. Oh my goodness. And then the great debate begins. Or actually, there isn't a great debate to have. Most people just very casually toss the word weed at a dandelion. They are unwelcome in most people's lawns. We pick them, we pluck them, we lament them. Maybe that's too strong a word, I don't know. But they are what they are. They are an indigenous wildflower. They are one of the most important early spring nectar sources for most of the pollinators that then provide us with everything we eat through the rest of that summer and even into the following winter. They are important. They are quite beautiful if you choose to see them that way. But of course they're untidy and they don't obey the rules, because crocuses and snowdrops and daffodils, they grow in bulbs, and so the joy of their reproduction is that where in one spring you might have had 6 daffodils, through that summer as they absorb the nutrients back into themselves, as they grow and swell, they might start to divide, and the next summer you might have 10 or 12, and they grow outwards in a very civilized, clumpy way. But dandelions go everywhere. Outside our house on the one side we have a wooden fence, and between the pedestrian footpath and the wooden fence there is a narrow strip of gravel. It's about 10-15 centimeters, not even. It's just gravel. And over the course of living in this house for nearly 3 years, through 2 full summers at least, we've just left it. And so right now, outside the gate and outside the fence on that side of our house, there is an array of all kinds of things that have decided to grow by themselves. Some of them are really pretty. Some of them have snuck through under the fence, and they're part of other plants that grow elsewhere in our garden. But there are a lot of dandelions. And the dandelions aren't pretty anymore. They have lost their heads, they've turned to seed, and their leaves are wilting. Or the ones that are left, because we're quite good at picking the leaves to feed them to our guinea pigs, because they love them. For them, that's like a Class A drug. Not that I would know what it's like to have a Class A drug, of course, but anyway. I don't really know what some of our neighbours think of us because of our dandelions. I think that there are some. I've heard a couple of people over the years just wandering past and tutting a little at the untidiness of this little strip and why it isn't more neat and ordered. Lucas loves, of course, to pick the dandelion heads and blow the seeds away. And the other day he was blowing them, and they were blowing up the streets towards the village from our house and across and into some quite manicured gardens and lawns, where they will be, no doubt, unwelcome. So why talk about dandelions? Well, because we call them weeds, because they're messy, because they are largely unwelcome in our lives, in most of our lives. One of the things that's happened in lots of people's lives through the course of this coronavirus time is that there's been a lot more gardening done. And I have friends and colleagues who've said they've been surprised at how much they've enjoyed their gardening, or how much gardening they've managed to do. And of course gardening is quite often about order, about framing and creating and shaping the little patch of earth that is part of our lives into a particular form that best pleases us. And that's okay. Of course it is. I don't really like gardening. I don't like putting my hands in soil very much. I love cutting the grass, but not a great deal else. And I've always gardened with a kind of, with a nod towards nature. So our gardens have been messy and a bit overgrown, a bit untidy. They've been the opposite of what you'd see on any jigsaw puzzle that was a picture of a garden rather than just some bit of nature. So why talk about dandelions? Well, I was in a webinar yesterday. First time I've ever been in a webinar. A webinar that was put on by our evangelism and growth team at head office in London by one of our officers, Emma Nash. And about 220 of us were online at the same time. It was a little chaotic. But we were talking about and exploring the themes of trauma and cycles of trauma. And that coronavirus represents for all of us trauma in some ways. The foundations of our assumptions have been shaken in all kinds of ways, whether it was in the early days, whether you could buy toilet paper and a packet of flour, or more generally into the future, for some, whether they will ever go back to the life that they lived. For some who are elderly, whether they will ever return to church or to places where they have gone with a kind of casual freedom that they may no longer feel because they worry about a virus that may take their lives. All kinds of things are traumatic. Living at home with the same people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 7.5 weeks now can be traumatic. And that's not a joke. That's not me being flippant about, rubbing each other up the wrong way. There is no doubt that there is an enormous psychological cost to pay in times to come for what this season and this time have been. We've been in a kind of, and I'll talk about this a bit more as I digest the material from yesterday, and I've ordered a book that was mentioned as part of it. We've been in a heroic moment for some weeks now, where we've kind of banded together, and we've been in solidarity with each other in being gritty and determined. But as I've spoken about a couple of times in the last week or two, that heroic mantle is slipping, and for many people, probably most people actually, I know for myself, we're moving through that into a bit of a wilderness of a combination of lament and deep sadness and worry and ourselves diminished, because we can't put our arms around people who help us to know who we are and that we are loved. We can't put our arms around people in a way that helps us to feel loving in the way that we are used to being loving. The novelty of faces on screens, it hasn't worn off, but it is becoming less exciting, maybe less new, certainly, than it has been. Things are messy, and we shouldn't expect them to not be messy. And I guess I begin talking about dandelions because dandelions, I think, are one of nature's great invitations to let the wind blow as it blows, and let things grow where they grow, and let there be some mess introduced into our greatest attempts at order, especially where that order is unnatural in many ways. Now, I'm not the tidiest person, and I find myself quite stressed, as I've said before, when my study is disordered, when we don't make the bed, when there are clothes lying around in the bedroom. There are places in our home which, for me, need to have a sense of calm about them in order for me to feel feel able to go into them and be calm in myself. But I'm not the tidiest person. And mess is for good and ill. Something that gives us a chance to just breathe out a bit and not feel like we need to be on top of everything, and we need to be organizing everything and planning everything and pulling out every tiny little first, little growth of something that may be a weed, however we might define that, in our gardens, in our souls, in our relationships, in our homes, in our lives, at the same time as mess creates anxiety and stress and a lack of peace, a lack of calm. But I do want to this morning say that there is nothing wrong with this being a messy time in our lives. Beyond the jokes about how often we have a shower or brush our hair or our teeth, or some of those are great liberations. And I did one of these sessions a little while ago, and in the joy of not needing to impress anybody at this time, and what that might feel and look like for you, for me. Certainly in our appearance, in what we do to go out into the world to present ourselves in the way that we are used to doing. Dandelions. I love dandelions. They belong here. They've probably been here since before there were people here, or at least as long. They're completely edible. You can eat every single part of a dandelion. It's good for you. Might not be the tastiest thing you ever have, but you can. They are nutritious. They are food. They are, and even if we can go to the shops and not worry anymore about whether there'll be eggs or baked beans or toilet paper, and pretty much buy what we want in terms of the variety of food that's available, dandelions remain for those insects that work so hard through the whole of their brief lives to gather the nectar that they need to survive, and in the process unwittingly pollinate so much of the food that we then go to shop and to buy and to enjoy in our neatly stocked and ordered shops in careful packaging. We bring them home, we put them into our neat fridges in neat order. We maybe even sometimes cook them artistically and put them onto plates in ways that are beautiful. Dandelions feed the feeders. Dandelions feed the insects. They're part of our life. Why don't we like them? Well, maybe one of the reasons we don't like them is that they don't behave themselves. They go where they like. They grow where they want to. And that's part of their success. They go into the mess, and they add to the mess, and they use the mess, and they provide something nutritious in the midst of the mess. Am I stretching this a bit too far? Praise of dandelions? Maybe I am. But I wanted today to say something quite serious about mess, and about not just the fact of our lives, our loving, our relationships, our self-image, our faith, being essentially messy, or at least having messy edges where things can be growing and surprising us and unraveling a bit, because we can be too neat and too ordered in every part of our lives. But not just that mess is there, but that it's actually to be embraced in all kinds of ways. I had a conversation with someone yesterday who's had an incredibly traumatic few years in their life, and who was apologizing to me for not being able to do something that they needed to do. And I didn't know what to do with that, really, because I just thought there's absolutely nothing about the thing you've contacted me about that is anything like as important as you being helpfully in the mess of your life right now. So, again, mess doesn't feel great, doesn't look great. Sometimes it is quite liberating to just say, leave the dishes, sit on the sofa. Inside and out in all kinds of ways, we can do that. We can give ourselves room to not try to order everything, sort everything, neaten everything, tidy everything, manicure and propagate and grow and nurture just the right things in just the right places in a way that actually is exhausting. I had a long conversation with someone once who had that kind of garden. And I said to them, because I knew them quite well, I said to them on one of my visits, do you enjoy your garden? Do you just sit back and enjoy it? And they said yes very quickly, and then there's a bit of a pause, and they said, actually it's quite tiring. It's quite tiring to be so hyper vigilant for the little thing that I think is out of place, or shouldn't be there, or isn't growing the way I thought it should grow, isn't behaving itself in the way that it is supposed to behave. So whatever mess there is in your life today, maybe for some time, let it be there. Let it be there. Again, there's been pressure we've put on ourselves, and has come in some ways from the well-intentioned exhortations to pick up a craft or do something, to use this time to catch up, to sort things, and maybe we've been doing that a bit. But we're in trauma, all of us. We are in trauma. We are in traumatic circumstances, dealing with traumatic emotions, however large or small they may feel. We are in the midst of a great unknown that will extend into a greater unknown as it unfolds in the future. And there needs to be room around that for us to be messy. And that's okay. And that's even important, necessary, healthy and good, though it may not feel like that right now. So, maybe just for today, if you're a dandelion murderer, leave them in your grass, leave them in your garden, just for today. Just let them have another day. Maybe tomorrow you can be ruthless again, but let them be there. And if they just are for today for you a symbol of the beauty of mess and disorder as we impose it on the world and ourselves, then let them invite you into a different kind of frame of mind, perhaps a different way of being yourself today, where you know what, it's okay. It's okay for there to be even some significant mess right now, however unpleasant that might be, as part of us being in trauma together and carrying heavy loads before we even entered into this time, many of us. So be kind to yourself today. Let there be some mess. And maybe most importantly, whoever's sharing your house, let their mess spill over a bit more than you've perhaps been able to make room for up to now, even just today. Let's have a gentle day in the mess of it all. Cheers.